Now, I had a conversation with this friend about the Star Trek films and movies and TV shows, and how this person really, really doesn't like the J.J. Abrams movies. And to try and explain why, let me draw a little bit of a diagram. So Star Trek, the original, came out in the 1960s. It was a TV show that ran for a little while. It was moderately successful. That's putting it mildly. It did definitely caught the public's imagination in America, and it ran for several years. And after it finished, there were a couple of movies that took the crew several years later, after the original 5-year mission into space had been completed, and put them in full feature-length motion picture movies. Now, the second of these, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, was noted as being a particularly good movie. And it took one of the characters of Khan, who was in the original Star Trek franchise, and was actually, in the original franchise, a character who was an extremely 500-year-old superhuman, extremely old superhuman, and he'd been in the original TV shows, and the movies brought Khan back, and so the second movie, Star Trek II, featured the Wrath of Khan and his plot to take over and get revenge on Kirk and the people who had wronged him. But after these movies were so successful, or concurrently with them, it was deemed that actually, well, no, this is good enough to come back to TV, and so there was another series of Star Trek called The Next Generation. This is where Picard and that cast arrived from. They ran for a couple of years, and after Next Generation finished, there were a couple of movies such as First Contact featuring the Borg and Nemesis that came out. But after Next Generation, there was 2 more concurrent TV shows known as Voyager and Deep Space Nine. And throughout all of these, it's all set in one continuity, 4 completely separate television shows, but one person behind the scenes. After Voyager and Deep Space Nine, they went back and they said, well, let's actually make a show called Enterprise, which is about the original founding of the Space Fleet and the Academy, and it really set the whole thing into stage. Enterprise, though, was not quite as much of a success as it has been historically. At this point, a lot of people thought the Star Trek brand had played out. Cue J.J. Abrams, who was tasked with rebooting the Star Trek franchise as a movie and created a movie called Star Trek. Now, it's no surprise to me that J.J. Abrams went on then, after this, subsequently, to produce the first in the new series of Star Wars movies, because a lot of people saw his movie of Star Trek and said, well, no, that's actually, it doesn't share much of the same DNA with the original Star Trek. It's an action-heavy movie. Star Trek it's a science fiction franchise, but it's got a deeper purpose. I mean, there is action in it, but it's about the characters. It's about the drama. It's about the politics, about the interpersonal relationship between human and fellow man, woman, and fellow man and woman, and then man, woman, and fellow aliens, and how we're all alike, ultimately, when it comes together, and the commonality between sentient species. That's what Star Trek's about. It's not about just shooting the bad guys, which Star Wars definitively always has been about. But Star Trek franchise came out, and J.J. Abrams said, well, it doesn't matter that I'm doing something very different, because this is going to be set in a different continuity. And that all made sense. Apart from when you actually watch the film, he got Leonard Nimoy, the bloke who originally played Spock in the original Star Trek movies, TV show and movies. And so Leonard Nimoy had originally been in continuity, and despite the fact every other character was recast as a younger, alternative version of themselves, what actually happened if you watch that original Star Trek movie is at some point after the Next Generation TV show, there had been a schism where Spock and one other set of aliens, Romulans, I think, had been sent back in time, and they had changed history. A couple of things happened. A planet was destroyed, but the main event was the death of Kirk's father. So now, in this new continuity, James T. Kirk wasn't coming from an established Starfleet family. He was but he was now a rogue, a little bit of a rebel who grew up without a father figure in his life, and that fundamentally changed the character of James T. Kirk. James T. Kirk then grows up with no parents, and what he then does in that movie is sort of regain his original intended destiny. At the end of that movie, he's back in charge of the Enterprise. So Star Trek 1 is a reimagining of the original television series. It brings the crew back together, and at the end of it, in this new continuity, Kirk is back in charge. So J.J. Abrams, the movie was immensely successful, and J.J. Abrams said, right, well, there's going to be a sequel, Star Trek 2. And he revealed the title of this movie to be Into Darkness. And almost immediately, a lot of people turned around and they said, oh, Star Trek 2. You're not going to remake any other old stories from the original Star Trek series, are you? Such as the other second Star Trek movie, Wrath of Khan, which everyone loves and considers a great thing. And J. Abrams absolutely insisted this is not going to be a remake of Wrath of Khan. This is not going to be a remake of Wrath of Khan. He then cast Benedict Cumberbatch to play the villain of the movie, who he gave a new name. And despite people asking, is this guy's not playing Khan, is he? They were absolutely adamant. This is not Khan. Now, the weird thing is, if you actually watch Into Darkness, which is even more of a heavy action, crime, spy, suspense movie than Star Trek, the original Star Trek, it really doesn't share much DNA with the original Star Trek series, which is fine. It's its own thing. It's doing its own thing. But having established the continuity of this new timeline, which is separate from the originals, what caught a lot of people by surprise when they watched it is that actually they were lying through their teeth when they said this is not a remake of the original Star Trek. This is definitively a remake of Star Trek 2, and Benedict Cumberbatch is indeed playing a new version of Khan. However, this new version of Khan has almost nothing in similar with the old version of Khan. He's not 500 years old. He's not even the same nationality as the original actor, and his motives and modus operandi are completely different. But the thing that really irritates me is that it just doesn't make any sense. You've gone to this trouble of establishing that the new continuity is only different and diverges from the original continuity at this point here, when Spock and the Romulans went back in time and James Kirk's father was killed. You can do anything from this point onwards, and indeed there was a third Star Trek movie set in this continuity that came out and was even less successful, and J.J. Abrams was not actually the director of that one. But Into Darkness, it goes back and it rewrites and it changes things that happened before this original version. And this irritates me. If for no other reason, I am absolutely fine with movies being popcorn action, but I'm fine with movies being dumb as hell. We all need to turn our brains off now and then and just enjoy the action. And I'm fine with movies, actually, I really like movies that give me some deep emotional or complex plotting to get my head around, where you're trying to work out what's going on and put all the pieces together. The Christopher Nolan style puzzle box movie is a brilliant thing. But it's these movies in the middle which want to have their they want to show something bright and intelligent and deep. They actually have something bright, intelligent, and deep. All of this stuff going on here, you don't need to know about any of it. But once you've got a smart idea, something Hollywood tends to do time and time again is they want to hide the fact they've actually thought about this stuff. They're almost ashamed of their own intelligence. So having gone to the trouble of establishing this is the divergent point in history, to then recast Benedict Cumberbatch of Khan, fine, that would have been a good choice. But Into Darkness has so many scenes which are deliberate inversions of what happened in the original Star Trek 2 movie. So many moments where they deliberately do something that's structurally similar but on its head compared to Star Trek 2. But no one who hasn't seen Star Trek 2 or cares about the Star Trek franchise would care. There is a point, it's towards the end of the movie, it's almost too late to save the movie, where Benedict Cumberbatch growls, "That's not my name." Up to that point, he's been going through a completely different moniker. He says, "That's not my name. My real name is Khan." And he growls it. And anyone who loves Star Trek 2, at that point, it's like a middle finger. And anyone who's not watched Star Trek 2 and knows about the history of this character, why should they care? Movies do this all the time, and J.J. Abrams isn't unique. I really like Daniel Craig as James Bond. The original Casino Royale film was particularly good. It was a real breath of fresh air in the franchise. Now, I do have to give Quantum of Solace a little bit of a free break here. Quantum of Solace was produced during the shortly after the Hollywood writers' strike. So they began they began preparing for the movie and then lost their writers. And so they had a load of set pieces and direction the way the film was meant to go, but no key writing stuff to actually tie it all together. And it shows, because something happens in Quantum of Solace that for me completely ruins the movie and turns it on its head. Quantum of Solace is not a dumb movie, but it wants you to think it is. It's mostly about car chase sequence and running and gunning. But there's a point 3/4 of the through the movie where James Bond and the sidekick find themselves in an underground river, and what happens is, up to this point, everyone's assumed that the plot is about oil, that the bad guy is buying up land so he's in control of oil reserves, because oil is used traditionally known to be the source of money and power. But James Bond finds himself in the ground, and they find this underground river, and there's one single line of dialogue where James Bond, Daniel Craig, says, "It's not about the oil, it's about the water," and this goes almost unremarked. About 20 minutes later, you're preparing for the final shootout where the bad guys are going to have a fight, going to be brought down, and this bad guy is in negotiation with the dictator ruler of this country he's in, and he just turns around the contract and he tells the dictator that he now owns 99% of all the water supplies in his country, and that his dastardly plot is actually that he's just going to set the tax rate for all the water supplies that this dictator's people are going to need for their continued survival. It's a clever twist. And it should have been a clever twist on an established formula, playing with audience expectations. But the movie doesn't want you to know about it. It's almost seems like, okay, we've done something clever here, but don't you worry about that. Look, guns, shooting, action, tits and boobs and motorbikes. It's just why, as I said, I can handle popcorn cinema. But when a film tries to do something quite clever and then backtracks away from the clever moment to distract you with meaningless popcorn fare, have the conviction of your beliefs. And I've been talking about J.J. Abrams. I'm going to give you one final example where this all comes apart. The new Star Wars movies. I'm not going to go into depth on exactly what is wrong with these movies. There's so many good things about them, but there's so many bad things about them. The Force Awakens was a remake of the original Star Wars film, A New Hope. It is so blatant, it's undeniable. J.J. Abrams basically said, we're going to retell the story but with a new set of characters, and that's fine. Force Awakens is fun popcorn filler Fred. I've got a lot of problems with it because I really wanted to see the original cast back together, and we were denied the opportunity, but it's fine for what it is. Different director Rian Johnson then took on the second movie, The Last Jedi, and a lot of people are going to stop watching the moment to say this. I like The Last Jedi. I think The Last Jedi is actually a pretty fantastic film. The whole way through it, I had no idea what was going to happen next. And what happened next was actually always quite intelligently done. It was a well-told story. It's actually a really well-directed and beautiful movie. However, it deliberately subverts your expectation. It doesn't give you easy rewards. There's a lot of difficult stuff to digest there. And I can completely understand that. A lot of people will have said, this movie isn't the Star Wars movie we wanted to see. And the audience reaction was so negative and so diverse that I'm pretty sure Disney got scared and they called J.J. Abrams back in. There's a lot more going on behind it, but they did the final Star Wars movie, Return of Skywalker, and that movie almost goes too far in the opposite direction. It's so desperate to please. It's so desperate to have the big moments. It's so desperate to give you all of the things that you expect to see in a Star Wars movie that it doesn't do anything original. It doesn't do anything unique. It doesn't do anything clever throughout its entire runtime. It felt like 2 movies worth of plot crammed into one, and then all of the interesting plot cut out in the editing suites. Now, I'm not going to comment on who's to blame for that travesty, but there is one particular moment. A lot of people have it. One of the big problems that The Force Awakens set up Snoke as the new villain of the piece until he was resolutely killed halfway through The Last Jedi. Kylo Ren is then his subordinate who takes over, only the Kylo Ren we see in The Return of Skywalker is a very definitively different character from the one we had at the end of The Last Jedi. Course correction for the character, and I'd say this is the one course correction that was absolutely not needed. Kylo Ren, where he was at the end of The Last Jedi, was an extremely interesting person. But the reason he's been course corrected is because it's revealed that Snoke was actually a clone of the Empire. Some people don't like this. Some people say it's a bad move. But no, the moment I saw Snoke die and I walked out of The Last Jedi, I started thinking, well, they haven't provided any explanation for who this character is. They haven't provided anything that would actually make his arc in any way something that we could actually find satisfying. So this plot thread is going to have to be picked up again in the next movie. And it is picked up again. The next movie explains in one line of written text and then one camera shot sliding through a room that Snoke was a clone of the original Emperor Palpatine, the bad guy from all the way back in the original Star Wars movie, who we thought had died all the way back in, I think it's 1983, the original movie comes out. Emperor Palpatine comes back to haunt us. I actually have no problems with this. I think it's the only satisfying thing they could have done given the problems. Snoke had been such a dead character. There'd been so much potential then it was cut down to originally. You had to tie him back into something knowledgeable. And bringing the Emperor back is not in itself a stupid idea, but the way they handled it, that one camera shot panning through the room, and then, oh, Snoke's a clone, and it's never acknowledged again, it's never referenced. They could have done so much clever stuff with the idea of there being multiple clones of the Emperor. The Star Wars Expanded Universe has done stuff, did do stuff back in the 1990s in books and comics with the idea of clones of the Emperor. And the movies, they give us the explanation and then retreat away from it because they give the explanation because they had to work out the answer. There had to be an answer to this conundrum, but they don't want to dwell on it. They don't want to ever acknowledge that this ever was a problem. It's like, okay, here you go. There's the answer. Now shut up, go away, don't talk about it. And it's actually offensive to the watchers. But that's not the moment that ruins the Return of Skywalker for me. The moment is critical moment at the end of both movies. In The Last Jedi, the whole plot of the thread is that there is a small group of Republic, the rebels, the survivors from the New Republic, who have been fighting the new Empire. There's a very small group of them, and they're being hunted, and they're trapped, and they're stranded, and they're dying. And they put a message out for help to the rest of the galaxy. They put a distress call out going, help us, we're dying. We can't help ourselves. The enemy are too powerful, they're too strong. We need your help or we're going to die. And it's actually a major point of the movie that nobody comes to their aid. The bad guys are just too strong, too powerful. No one is prepared to stand up to the bullies and help out. It's a really important point of The Last Jedi. However, three-quarters of the way through The Return of Skywalker, it turns out that not only is the new bad guys even more powerful, the return of Palpatine brings with him even more powerful ships with super powerful lasers that can blow up planets. The armada, the force and the enemy that you have to fight is 10 times stronger than even that you suspected you were fighting. And so a message is sent out. We need to fight to bring the Empire down or they're going to kill us all. And they go off for the battle. And this was a waste of the return of Lando Calrissian because he appears halfway through this battle with this armada behind him. An entire armada of ships coming behind him to fight off the Empire. The galaxy bands together. It's a complete repudiation of everything The Last Jedi said would happen when you put out a distress call. In this terms, they put out a distress call and the universe answered their call. It's a fundamental message of hope. That's not a bad thing. It's actually a really nice inversion because all they needed to do, and it's the really clever point, is that what they had here was hope. And by sending a message of hope, by telling the universe, we can beat the Empire, we can save the day, we need your help, but we can do this. And the universe responds. But in The Last Jedi, they send out a message of despair. And the universe shrugs its shoulders and looks the other way. That flip and that inversion between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, that could have been a really powerful moment. But the movie is just so incompetently handled and so ashamed to actually explore and delve into any of the plot threads contained within it. So ashamed to treat its audience with any measure of respect, it goes uncommented on. Instead, it comes across as a statement of, we were wrong to make the last movie. We were wrong to put it together and we apologise. But the net result of a lot of people is you were wrong to make The Return of Skywalker. You were wrong to do this. And we're left in this situation where there's a trilogy that set a lot of things up and none of them got paid off satisfactorily. Some people like the second film, some people absolutely hate the second film. Some people like the third film. I and a lot of other people, I don't hate it. I just think it's sad. And the problem here is not any one thing it's doing. It's not a stupid film. If it was a stupid film, I could just sit back, turn my brain off, and eat popcorn. But there is stuff going on in The Rise of Skywalker that asks you to think, that wants you to think. But then every time it gets anywhere near one of those topics, it actually retreats away from the concept. It's scared of its own intelligence, and it treats the audience with disrespect. And this is why, in both the Star Trek and the Star Wars franchise, J.J. Abrams has caused a lot of permanent damage.